In this lecture, we will be learning why body needs energy, how it produces that energy, what are the factors that affect energy production, and what are the clinical implications of energy production process. In your daily life, you have seen that human beings eat food, breathe in oxygen, they produce carbon dioxide, and then they get energy after eating food to do their work. Food comes from plants and oxygen is also produced by plants. But how do plants produce this food and oxygen? Plants use carbon dioxide and water and obtain the energy from sunlight. Oxygen is produced as a byproduct. Cellular respiration is the process that occurs inside the cell. It involves the breakdown of food, it requires oxygen, and in the end it produces energy in the form of ATP. Carbon dioxide and water are released as the waste products. So food has different nutrients in the form of protein, carbohydrates, fats, which are broken down into the monomers. These monomers then enter into the metabolic pathway inside the cell, and ultimately energy is formed in the form of ATP. Let's have a look at the chemical reaction behind cellular respiration. So this is a molecule of glucose, that is a 6-carbon compound. Through this chemical reaction, these 6 molecules of carbon are released as 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. This reaction requires oxygen and water is produced as a byproduct. This process leads to the release of energy in the form of ATP. What is ATP? ATP is a nucleotide that has a nitrogen base, adenine, and sugar molecule, ribose, and 3 high energy phosphate bonds. When the body performs some work, the ATP is broken down into ADP. A phosphate is released, which leads to the release of high free energy. When your body requires energy, you need to synthesize ATP. At that time, ADP gets converted into ATP by the addition of a phosphate, and this process occurs in the mitochondria of your cell, which is why mitochondria is called the powerhouse of a cell. Now let's have a quick overview of the steps of cellular respiration. The first step is glycolysis that occurs in the cytoplasm of a cell. In glycolysis, glucose is broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. This pyruvate then enters the mitochondria and undergoes oxidation. Pyruvate forms acetyl-CoA. This acetyl-CoA then enters the Krebs cycle, in which carbon dioxide is released. Through all these steps, the cell accumulates NADH and FADH2. These are the electron carriers, which then carry electrons to electron transport chain. This electron transport chain leads to the formation of a large amount of ATP molecules and uses oxygen to produce water. Now we'll be studying these steps in more details. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. This is the step where glucose is broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. In the first step, 2 ATP molecules are used. In second step, 4 ATP molecules are generated. Therefore, the net gain in ATP is 2 molecules. In this process, we also generate 2 molecules of NADH, and the end product of this reaction is 2 molecules of pyruvate. This pyruvate then enters the mitochondrial matrix. Pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule generated from glucose, which was a 6-carbon molecule. So we have 2 molecules of pyruvate. The pyruvate then releases 1 molecule of carbon dioxide and produces acetyl-CoA, 2 molecules. In this process, a molecule of NADH is also produced. So overall, you will have 2 molecules of NADH because you had 2 molecules of pyruvate to begin with. Thus, the net production of this reaction is 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, 2 molecules of NADH, and 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA, which will then enter into the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle also occurs in mitochondrial matrix. As we had 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA to start with, this Krebs cycle will also occur twice. So all the products that we are seeing here will be double in net production. So in Krebs cycle, there is the release of carbon dioxide, and you have NADH here, FADH2 here, and some ATP is released in this process as well. So the net product of this reaction are 4 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of NADH, 2 molecules of FADH2, and 2 molecules of ATP or GTP. GTP, just like ATP, is a nucleotide which is guanosine triphosphate. Till now, through the 3 steps of glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, and Krebs cycle, we have accumulated NADH and FADH2, which are high energy electron donors. These molecules then enter the electron transport chain, which you are seeing here. So this is the double membrane of mitochondria. This is the outer membrane and this is the inner membrane. The inner membrane has the complex of electron transport chain. Here you will see the NADH enters at the first complex and FADH2 enters at the second complex. At both these reactions, you will see that there is a release of hydrogen ion, and these hydrogen ions will be transported outside. Since NADH2 is producing more hydrogen ions, it will generate more potential energy at this reaction. Along with this hydrogen ion, there is electron produced in this reaction. This electron is carried forward in the electron transport chain. Finally, this electron is accepted by oxygen and hydrogen, which produces water. But this reaction is now generating the potential of hydrogen ions on one side. When these hydrogen ions are taken through the ATP synthase, this potential energy is converted into chemical energy, and we see the formation of ATP. Now, as we have seen that NADH has more potential of generating this hydrogen ion concentration than FADH2, from each molecule of NADH you get 2.5 to 3 molecules of ATP, whereas from each molecule of FADH2 you get 1.5 to 2 molecules of ATP. Thus, the net product of this electron transport chain can be 28 to 34 molecules of ATP and 6 molecules of water, which you are seeing here. Now let's quickly summarize the yield of ATP through all the steps of cellular respiration. From glycolysis, we got directly 2 molecules of ATP and 2 molecules of NADH. Then there was the step called pyruvate oxidation, which formed 2 NADH. The acetyl-CoA formed in the oxidation of pyruvate enters the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle leads to the formation of 2 molecules of ATP directly, and then 6 molecules of NADH and 2 molecules of FADH2, which will then enter the electron transport chain. In electron transport chain, each molecule of NADH produces 2.5 to 3 molecules of ATP, and each molecule of FADH2 produces 1.5 to 2 molecules of ATP. Thus, the net production of ATP can vary from 30 to 38 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose, depending on the efficiency of hydrogen ion potential built across the inner membrane of mitochondria. Now, what we have studied till now is the aerobic respiration in which oxygen was used. We started with glucose. Glucose forms 2 molecules of pyruvate or pyruvic acid, and that enters into the Krebs cycle. But let's say there is a situation where there is not enough oxygen available and the cell has to enter the anaerobic respiration. That is called fermentation. The fermentation can be of 2 types depending on the end product from pyruvic acid. You can have the formation of lactic acid, or you can have the formation of ethanol and carbon dioxide. Thus, depending on the byproducts, the fermentation can be of 2 kinds. Alcoholic fermentation, which happens in the single cellular organisms or plants. In this, alcohol is formed as a byproduct. This phenomena is used in beer making companies or distilleries, or in the formation of breads and in the process of baking. If lactic acid is formed as a byproduct, it is called lactic acid fermentation. This kind of fermentation occurs in animals and human beings. When we work out a lot and we do not have enough oxygen, the body enters into anaerobic respiration and we have accumulation of lactic acid in our muscles, which leads to muscle fatigue. After some time, when you're done with working out, the lactic acid is then decomposed and the muscle fatigue is gone. Now let's look at the factors which can regulate the ATP production through cellular respiration. Let's look at the steps again. There is glycolysis, then there is a transition reaction and Krebs cycle, everything leading to the electron transport chain. But let's say there is a situation where we already have a lot of ATP in the body. One of the important enzymes of glycolysis is phosphofructokinase, which is then inhibited by the excess of ATP and the glycolysis reaction is stopped. An important enzyme in Krebs cycle is isocitrate dehydrogenase, which is also inhibited by excess ATP and the ATP production is stopped. Mitochondria is a very important organelle for cellular respiration because different compartments of mitochondria performs different steps of cellular respiration, which is why the structures are designed to help that process. For example, the outer membrane is permeable to small molecules, which helps in the entry of pyruvate inside the mitochondria. The matrix of mitochondria contains all the enzymes for Krebs cycle and pyruvate oxidation. The inner membrane contains the electron transport chain and ATP synthase and is impermeable to ions, which is why it is able to build the hydrogen ion potential on one side of the membrane. What is the significance of cellular respiration? The cellular respiration leads to the production of energy in the form of ATP. This energy is required for performing life functions. It's required for synthesis of other biomolecules, and it is also required for maintaining a balance in the universe. How? Now, we have seen that solar energy is used by plants to produce oxygen and glucose. This oxygen and glucose is used by mitochondria to produce water and carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide and water is used in the process of photosynthesis by the plants. What are some clinical implications or manifestations of this process? Some people might have mitochondrial disease in which the mitochondria does not perform its function very well, or the mitochondria might be destroyed. This leads to reduction in ATP production, and the organs are not able to perform their work at its highest efficiency. Lactic acid is built up when we work out, and this lactic acid gets accumulated in muscles. In the recovery phase, this lactic acid is then catabolized, and then the muscles regain their normal state and can perform more work. Lactic acid production is also increased in the cancer cells because the cancer cells respire and use energy at a very fast rate, and sometimes they are not able to consume oxygen at a high efficiency. So they produce a lot of lactic acid, and this lactic acid is also used by these cells to form more and more energy to keep on replicating.